She's a soldier, she's stubborn, she always survives. We are busy setting up her sister's engagement party, so please do not call at this time and ruin my family's mood. That was my biological mother's response to the medical commander at the exact moment I collapsed with a critical wound on the front lines. I had drained my blood money to carry that family. But while I was lying on the borderline of life and death in the emergency room, my mother and sister posted a photo, raising expensive wine glasses on social media with a cruel caption, "Finally, a peaceful day without the sisters' war drama." They were celebrating on the exact same estate that I used my blood money to buy back. Staring at the picture, I slowly let out a cold smirk, then dialed a number. Something that would surely turn their drama-free day into a nightmare. Before we continue, take a moment to hit like and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really want to know the end of this story. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Sergeant First Class Sarah Jenkins grabbed the drag strap of my plate carrier. She hauled me backward into the med tent, my boots dragging through the loose gravel and leaving a thick, dark trail behind me. The canvas ceiling shook hard. Dust and loose dirt rained down on my face as another mortar shell slammed into the perimeter just a few hundred yards out. The ground vibrated up through my spine. Blinding fluorescent tubes violently assaulted my retinas. Snip! Reep! Sarah gritted her teeth using heavy black trauma shears to cut straight through the Kevlar and the blood-soaked khaki underneath. The smell hit the back of my throat instantly. I'm a combat medic. I know that smell better than I know the scent of my own childhood home. Hot copper, rusted iron, and charred meat. The distinct stench of the borderline between life and death. A jagged piece of mortar shrapnel had torn through my side, lodged deep in my right flank. I didn't scream. Screaming wastes oxygen and spikes your heart rate, pushing more blood out of the hole. My hands locked onto the cold iron rails of the medical cot. My knuckles turned bone white against the metal. I just clamped my jaw shut. I ground my molars together until my ears rang, staring dead ahead at the vibrating canvas roof. The pain wasn't just a physical sensation. It was a heavy, crushing weight sitting directly on my chest, trying to force the air out of my lungs. Sarah worked fast. She slapped a tourniquet high on my leg, where a secondary piece of shrapnel had bitten, tightening the windlass until the nylon dug deep into my muscle. Then she shoved an 18-gauge IV needle into the vein on my forearm. "Stay with me, Lex. Do not close your eyes," she ordered. Her voice was tight, her hands slick with my blood. She reached down to her tactical belt and pulled out the heavy black satellite phone. She punched in the emergency next of kin number from my deployment file. She hit the speaker button and set it on the metal surgical tray next to my head. The chaotic noise of the trauma tent, the yelling medics, the frantic boots scraping on dirt, the distant muffled thud of artillery somehow faded away. All that was left in my ears was the hollow ring. Ring, ring, echoing from that little plastic speaker. Then a voice. "Elena, my mother." "Hello, do you have any idea what time it is?" Loud, annoyed, inconvenienced. Sarah didn't miss a beat. "Ma'am, this is SFC Jenkins with the U.S. Army. I'm calling regarding your daughter Alexis. She sustained critical injuries from a mortar blast. We are prepping her for emergency medevac." "Wait, what?" Elena cut her off, not with panic, not with a mother's terror, with pure, unfiltered irritation. "Are you kidding me today? Alexis always does this." Sarah froze. The bloody gauze in her hand hovered over my open side. "Ma'am, your daughter is bleeding out. We are trying to keep her stable." "She's a soldier. She's stubborn. She always survives," Elena snapped. Through the static of the sat phone, I could clearly hear the sharp, crisp clinking of glassware in the background. Ice hitting crystal. "We are busy setting up her sister's engagement party, so please do not call at this time and ruin my family's mood." Click. The line went dead. A flat, heavy dial tone filled the space between us. Sarah stood completely still. She looked at the sat phone, then looked down at me. Her eyes were wide, swimming with a sickening, heavy amount of pity. "Jesus Christ, Lex!" Sarah whispered, a harsh curse slipping through her teeth. I looked back at her. I hated that pity. I didn't want it. My physical body was rapidly losing blood, slipping toward hypovolemic shock. But my soul just flatlined. The cold swept through my chest, freezing over any lingering, pathetic attachment I had left to the woman who gave birth to me. My medic brain kicked in. Triage. When you get a mass casualty situation, you assess the bodies. You sort the savable from the unsavable. You identify the dead tissue. The Guzman family wasn't just a toxic environment anymore. They were a necrotic limb. Gangrene. And if you don't aggressively debride gangrene, if you don't amputate it fast, it infects the blood and kills the whole body. It was time to cut them off. 30 minutes later, the blinding dust kicked up. The deafening roar of a Black Hawk medevac chopper shredded the freezing night air. They loaded me into the belly of the bird. The heavy vibration of the twin rotors rattled my teeth. I was wrapped tight in a crinkly silver mylar space blanket, trying to preserve my core temperature. An oxygen tube was shoved up my nose, burning my dry sinuses with every breath. The flight medic on board was constantly checking my vitals, his face cast in heavy shadows by the dim red tactical lights of the cabin. Deep in my cargo pocket against my good leg, my personal phone buzzed. Just one weak, pathetic vibration. I reached down. My arm felt like it was made of wet cement. My fingers were thick and numb, smeared with dried blood, but I managed to drag the phone out. I squinted through the cracked glass of the screen, the harsh red light reflecting off it. An email notification. From Hector. My father. I swiped it open. No subject line. Heard you got hurt. Hang in there. That was it. 8 words. No frantic phone call. No desperate voicemails begging to know if I was still breathing. No asking which military hospital in Germany they were flying me to. Just a sterile, gutless email from a coward who stood by with his hands in his pockets while his wife threw his bleeding daughter in the trash. I stared at the glowing text until my eyes burned. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone against the metal bulkhead of the chopper. The anger of civilians is loud, messy, and useless. The anger of a soldier is quiet. It is precise. I just pressed the power button. The screen went black. The physical darkness of that cracked glass blended perfectly with the pitch-black interior of the chopper, swallowing the very last ounce of weakness I had left for those people. 2 days post-op. Walter Reed Military Medical Facility, Germany Transition Ward. The smell of industrial bleach and heavy rubbing alcohol punched the back of my throat. It is a sterile chemical smell, the kind that immediately tells your brain you are not home. You are just a broken piece of government equipment waiting to be repaired. I lay completely flat on my back, still, silent. A dozen clear plastic IV tubes snaked out from under my thin hospital gown, pinned to my bruised skin with heavy surgical tape. A heart monitor beeped in the corner of the room. Slow, steady, indifferent. I took a shallow breath. A sharp, tearing pain ripped straight across my abdomen. A 6-inch surgical incision stapled shut. It hurt like absolute hell. Every time my chest rose, it felt like someone was dragging a serrated blade across my ribs. But that pain was a good thing. It meant I was still breathing. It was physical, undeniable proof that my heart was still pumping blood, contrary to the clinical death my mother had already assigned to me in her mind. To her, I was not a casualty. I was an inconvenience. A dropped call. I turned my head on the stiff pillow. My personal phone sat on the cheap plastic tray table next to the bed. The screen was still spiderwebbed with thick cracks from the mortar blast. I dragged my right arm across the scratchy hospital sheet. My muscles felt like wet cement, heavy and useless, but I managed to grip the phone. I unlocked it. The harsh blue light of the screen cut through the dim room, stinging my dry eyes. I looked at my notifications. I did not have any missed calls. No desperate text messages from my family asking if I survived the surgery. No panicked voicemails. Nothing. Instead, I opened a social media app. Right at the top of my feed was a fresh post from my younger sister, Chloe. The image burned itself directly into my retinas. 2 tall crystal flutes of expensive champagne. Beads of cold condensation rolled down the glass, catching the light. They were resting on a premium oak wood railing. Behind those drinks was the calm glass-like surface of Lake Geneva. The sky was painted in a perfect golden hour glow. It looked like a magazine cover, a high-end influencer's dream. Then I read the caption. A peaceful day, finally. Zero war drama and no PTSD vibe from the older sister. I stopped breathing. The heart monitor next to my bed spiked the tempo, jumping into a nervous rhythm. PTSD vibe, war drama. She took the blood I spilled. She took the nights I spent patching up blown apart 19-year-old kids in the dirt. She took the nightmares that kept me awake staring at the ceiling until dawn, and she reduced every single ounce of it to a cheap aesthetic. An annoyance, a bad vibe that ruined her party mood. I scrolled down the cracked glass of my screen, scraping against the calluses on my thumb. The comments section loaded. Right at the top was a profile picture of a woman with a bright cherry red smile. Elena, my mother. Her comment sat there pinned for the whole world to see. Our family deserves this day. I stared at those 5 words. I broke down the timeline in my head like an intelligence officer tracking enemy troop movements on a map. While I was bleeding out on a dirty canvas cot, while a military surgeon was elbow deep in my abdominal cavity pulling out jagged steel shrapnel, they were packing their bags. They drove up to the estate. They unloaded the caterers. They popped the corks on $100 bottles of wine. They raised their glasses to my absence. The fact that I was lying unconscious, cut open and half a world away, was exactly the peace they were actively hunting for. I was the trash they finally took out. I was a bulky, embarrassing secret they only remembered when they needed someone to pay a bill or lift heavy furniture. And where was my father, Hector? The man who sent me a gutless 8-word email. He was probably standing right out of frame, holding the bottle, keeping his mouth shut, just like he always did. My hand clamped down on the edges of the phone. I squeezed. The plastic case groaned under the pressure. The joints in my knuckles throbbed, locking up with a dull, heavy ache. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to hurl the phone against the cinder block wall and watch the glass shatter into 1,000 pieces. I wanted to tear the IV lines out of my arm and scream until my throat bled. But I did not. Civilian anger is loud. It breaks things. It throws tantrums, makes a scene, and cries for attention. Military anger is entirely different. It is silent. It is calculated. It is exact. I took a slow, agonizing breath, letting the sharp, biting pain of my stitches ground me back to reality. I brought the cracked screen closer to my face. I placed 2 calloused fingers on the glass. I pinched. I zoomed in. I dragged the image past the crystal champagne flutes. I dragged it past the golden hour sunset and the calm waters of the lake. I did not care about their drinks. I did not care about Chloe's half-baked influencer aesthetic. I stopped panning when the screen was filled entirely by the wood of the deck railing. Premium pressure-treated oak wood. Heavy, expensive, custom-built. I stared at the intricate grain of that wood. My eyes locked onto the exact spot where the glass rested. They were standing on my territory, drinking on my deck, celebrating my near-death on my property. I remembered exactly who paid for every single plank of that wood. 6 years ago. Forward operating base, 0300 hours. The desert wind ripped through the concrete barriers, throwing sharp, freezing sand against the corrugated tin roof of the comms tent. The grit stuck in the back of my throat, tasting like chalk and old iron. I was on the tail end of a 36-hour rotation, exhausted. My uniform was stiff with dried sweat and dust. Then the scratchy static of the satellite line cut through the dark. It was Elena. She was not calling to ask if I was safe. She never did. She was calling because her perfect artificial world was cracking. Hector had been dodging the IRS for years, hiding behind fake LLCs, bad bookkeeping, and sheer cowardice. But the federal government does not forget, and the bill had finally come due. The bank was initiating foreclosure on the Guzman lakefront estate. Through the heavy static, her voice was a shrill, frantic drill right into my eardrum. They are going to throw us out on the street, Alexis. The sheriff came with papers. Your father is an absolute wreck. You have that combat pay sitting in your account. You need to wire it right now. Do not let your father lose his dignity. Save the family home. Dignity. I stared down at the scuffed, dusty toes of my combat boots. Hector's dignity was apparently worth more than my life. I stayed awake the rest of that night sitting in front of a heavy encrypted military computer terminal. The screen cast a pale, sickly green glow across my face. $50,000. That was the exact number flashing on my screen. Every single cent of my savings. Blood money. Cash earned by walking point in hostile territory. Cash earned by kneeling in the dirt, tying tourniquets on missing limbs, and breathing in the sickening sweet smell of burned diesel and copper. I was ready to hit transfer. I was conditioned to take the hit. I was ready to empty my veins for them. But a JAG officer, a thick-necked captain from Texas, who had seen too many young soldiers get bled dry by their greedy relatives, stepped in. He looked at the foreclosure paperwork Hector faxed over. He slid it back across the metal folding table, tapping the paper with a thick finger. "No," the captain said, his voice completely flat. "Your old man is a massive liability. If you wire this cash to clear his mortgage, the IRS or his other creditors will just slap a lien on the property tomorrow. They will drain you dry, Sergeant. You do not feed a stray dog that bites." I looked at him, my eyes burning with severe fatigue. "So what is the play, sir? You want to save the house, you take the house. Absolute ownership. We draft a quitclaim deed. He signs the property over to you legally and entirely. You pay the bank directly. The asset becomes yours. It becomes a fortress, untouchable by his debts." I made the call back home. I laid out the terms, cold and factual. Hector did not even have the spine to take the phone. He stood in the background in silence. Elena took it. She masked her deep humiliation with a thick layer of gaslighting. Her tone was sharp, dismissive, trying to shrink the reality of what was happening. "Fine, Alexis, whatever. Who cares whose name is on some stupid piece of paper? It is still our family home. You are a soldier anyway. You move around constantly. You are never even here to use it. Just send the money so we can get back to normal." I believed her. I believed I was fulfilling my duty to the bloodline. The paperwork went through. The heavy red notary stamp slammed down on the documents with a loud, hollow thud. The quitclaim deed was officially filed with the county clerk in Wisconsin. From that exact day forward, the estate was mine. For 6 long years, I never threw it in their faces. I never acted like the landlord. Every November, the heavy property tax bill arrived in the mail. I paid it. Every spring, the premium homeowner's insurance was due. I paid it. The money was automatically deducted from my checking account while I slept on sagging canvas cots, shivering in the cold, and ate out of plastic bags. They lived in the house. They threw their lavish dinner parties. They painted the walls, bought expensive furniture, and acted like the king and queen of Lake Geneva. And I bled to keep their lights on. The sharp, biting pain in my abdomen snapped me forcefully back to the present. I was no longer in Germany. I had been flown stateside, discharged to recover in my own sparse civilian apartment. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady drone in the background. It was quiet, the kind of isolating quiet that rings in your ears after a deployment. My thumb hovered over the cracked glass of my phone screen. I looked at Chloe's Instagram post again. The 2 crystal champagne flutes sweating in the golden hour sunset glow. The expensive pressure-treated oak deck railing. Elena's comment glaring up at me, "Our family deserves this day." They really believed it. They drove up to the lake. They walked through the heavy front doors. They uncorked the wine. They stood on that deck, breathing in the fresh air, entirely intoxicated by the delusion of their own success. They thought they had finally cast off their heavy, embarrassing burden. They thought the war drama was securely locked away, bleeding out somewhere they did not have to look at. They felt safe. They felt untouchable. I let out a slow, ragged breath. A cold, hard smile crept onto my face, pulling at the corners of my mouth. The scar tissue on my side pulled tight. Civilian anger makes you scream. Military anger makes you execute. They were laughing on that deck, completely blind to the cold, hard reality of American property law. To them, it was the Guzman family estate. To the county, the state, and the federal government, there was only one name on that title. Mine. They thought they were standing on solid ground. They had no idea they were dancing on a landmine, and my finger was resting right on the detonator. I stood in front of the scratched mirror in the bathroom of my civilian apartment. The exhaust fan rattled a dull, grinding rhythm above my head. The cheap fluorescent bulb flickered, casting a sickly yellow light over the stained linoleum floor. I gripped the edge of the heavy medical tape secured across my right side. I ripped it off in one fast, aggressive pull. The skin underneath was violently bruised, a massive canvas of deep purple, ugly yellow, and necrotic black. The harsh, metallic smell of betadine immediately filled the small room, overpowering the stale scent of cheap apartment soap. My calloused fingers traced the heavy black sutures holding my abdomen together. The wound was angry. It was swollen red at the edges and weeping a thin, watery mixture of blood and plasma. The military surgeons at Walter Reed told me I needed a minimum of 4 weeks of absolute bed rest. I was not even supposed to lift a gallon of milk, let alone walk up a flight of stairs. My body was operating on sheer muscle memory. Heavy doses of military-grade painkillers and raw stubbornness. I grabbed a fresh square of sterile gauze from the counter, pressing it hard against the leaking incision. A sharp electric shock of pain fired directly into my spine. I gritted my teeth until my jaw popped. I did not flinch. I kept my back perfectly straight. Posture is a habit you cannot unlearn even when you are broken in half. On the edge of the faux wood bathroom vanity, my phone started vibrating. It was a harsh, continuous rattle against the cheap plastic surface. The cold blue light of the screen hit my pale face in the dark room, reflecting off the mirror. I picked it up. My knuckles were still swollen and stiff. I unlocked the screen. It was the Guzman family group chat. Dozens of notifications stacked tightly on top of each other. I had been back in the United States for exactly 48 hours. The military casualty assistance officer had formally notified my next of kin that I survived the transport flight and was discharged to recover. They knew I was home. They knew I had been cut open. I scrolled slowly through the messages. There was not a single question asking if I was in pain. No one asked if I could walk across my apartment. No one asked if I needed groceries delivered. Hector, my father, had sent a simple thumbs-up emoji to a picture of a floral arrangement. Chloe, my sister, was complaining in long paragraphs about the high cost of imported table linens. Then a digital invitation flashed on the screen. It featured a cursive gold font layered over a professional picture of the Lake Geneva waterfront. Chloe's engagement celebration. Right below the invitation, Elena dropped a hard, unyielding directive to the entire group. Alexis is back stateside to recover. Saturday morning, she can come up to the estate early to set up the wooden folding chairs and the large catering tents. She is built like an ox. She will knock that heavy lifting out in no time, so the rest of us can get ready. I stared at the words glowing on the screen. Built like an ox. She wanted me to haul heavy metal catering equipment and solid wooden chairs on a body that had just been torn open by mortar shrapnel. She did not view me as a wounded combat veteran. She viewed me as free disposable manual labor, a pack mule that she could order around to subsidize her lavish weekend. Before I could even lock the screen, a new notification dropped down from the top banner. A private direct message from Elena. I tapped it open. Listen to me closely. The message read, "When you show up on Saturday, you need to wear your army dress uniform, long sleeves, buttoned all the way up to your neck. I absolutely forbid you from showing any of those gross bloody bandages or fresh scars to our guests. Chloe has wealthy people coming. The country club crowd. They will be horrified if you walk around looking like a casualty. It will completely ruin the elegant vibe of the party. Keep your head down, do the lifting, and do not bring everyone down with your war drama." I read the message twice. I felt the cold, hard floor tiles seeping through my bare feet. I did not type back a furious paragraph. I did not call her to scream into the receiver. I did not shed a single tear. Crying is for civilians. Crying is for people who still have hope that the other person might actually possess a human soul. I had zero hope left for these parasites. They wanted me to be their unpaid servant. They wanted me to lock my torn, bleeding body inside a heavy, suffocating wool uniform just so I would not offend the delicate sensibilities of their rich friends. They wanted to use the exact estate I bought with my own blood money to stage a fake high society play, and they cast me as the invisible hired help. The corner of my mouth pulled up. It was a slow, dead smirk. The kind of smile a predator gets when the prey walks willingly into a steel trap. The silence in my bathroom was absolute, tactical silence. You never warn the enemy before you call in an airstrike. I backed out of the message thread. I did not leave the family group chat. I just muted it. Let them keep talking. Let them keep planning their perfect, elegant afternoon on my deck. Let them pick out the expensive champagne and the fine napkins. I opened my contact list. I scrolled past Elena. I scrolled past Hector. I scrolled past Chloe. I dragged my calloused thumb down the alphabet to the letter M, Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a high-end luxury real estate broker operating exclusively in the Lake Geneva area. He wore tailored suits, drove a black Mercedes, and possessed a reputation for being entirely ruthless in negotiations. He did not care about family drama. He did not care about hurt feelings, aesthetic vibes, or engagement parties. Marcus only cared about clean property titles, aggressive cash offers, and massive wire transfers. He was a shark. He was exactly the weapon I needed. I tapped his name. I lifted the phone to my ear. I listened to the steady ringing on the other end, staring at my bleeding side in the mirror. The time for silent endurance was officially over. The phone rang twice. Marcus Thorne picked up on the second ring. No small talk, no fake pleasantries. Guzman, his deep baritone voice echoed through the speaker, smooth, professional, and dripping with money. It has been a minute. Marcus was a shark in a tailored suit. He handled luxury properties around Lake Geneva, catering to old money and quiet wealth. He did not care about aesthetic Instagram posts or fake high society status. He cared about clean titles, verified bank statements, and massive wire transfers. Marcus, I need a status on the market up at the lake. Hot. Cash is moving fast, he said. I heard the heavy solid thud of a high-end car door shutting in the background. Funny you called. I have a retired couple, the Hendersons. Good people. Patriots. They are looking for a turnkey lakefront estate to settle down in. I pulled the county records this morning just to run a check. You are still listed as the sole absolute owner of that property on the water. You looking to sell? I did not answer right away. I held the phone tight against my ear. The cheap bathroom exhaust fan kept grinding above my head, rattling the plastic cover. The smell of industrial betadine radiating from my fresh stitches mixed with the stale air of the cramped apartment. Give me 10 minutes, I said. I ended the call. I stood there in the harsh yellow light, my bare feet flat against the cold linoleum floor. I am a combat soldier, but beneath the uniform, I was still a daughter. A tiny, pathetic fraction of my chest still wanted to believe that the woman who gave birth to me possessed a basic human conscience. I wanted to believe that if I forced her to look reality in the eye, she would remember the sacrifice. She would apologize. She would act like a mother. It was a tactical error to hope, but I had to run one final test. I opened the text thread with Elena. My stiff, swollen thumbs hovered over the cracked glass of the screen. Before the engagement party this weekend, you and I need to sit down. Just the two of us. We need to have a clear, honest conversation about the legal ownership of the estate. I need you to remember exactly what happened 6 years ago and what I paid to keep a roof over your head. I hit send. I set the phone face up on the edge of the faux wood vanity. I watched the screen go dark. I counted the seconds. I used a military breathing exercise to keep my heart rate down. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The surgical staples in my abdomen burned with a hot, sharp ache with every breath I took. Exactly 30 seconds passed. The screen lit up. 3 rapid chimes pierced the quiet isolation of the bathroom. She did not even pause to think. She did not reflect. She just fired from the hip with blind, arrogant rage. I picked up the phone and looked down at the glowing text bubbles. Are you serious right now, Alexis? Stop acting like a victim and bringing your heavy death energy into this house. Chloe is trying to have a happy day. And you want to drag out some stupid paperwork to ruin the mood. You always make it about you. Drop the drama and just show up early to set up the tents like I asked. Death energy. Stupid paperwork. Drama. I read the words a second time. My eyes scanned the harsh block letters. I let out a long, slow breath. With that single exhale, I pushed every last ounce of blood-tie guilt and familial obligation straight out of my ribcage. It was gone. The bridge was not just burned, it was rigged with high explosives and blown to dust. They wanted to throw a luxury party on a property they did not own. They wanted to hide my bleeding body to protect their fake social status. They wanted the benefits of my sacrifice while despising the soldier who made it. I bypassed the text thread and opened my recent calls. I tapped Marcus Thorne's name. He picked up on the very first ring. Guzman. My voice was completely flat. The emotion was stripped out, leaving only the cold, exact tone of a non-commissioned officer giving a strike coordinate. I am selling, I ordered. I want a cash offer. No bank financing, no contingencies, no home inspections. Tell the Hendersons the house is theirs. I want the earnest money wired directly into an escrow account by tomorrow morning. Marcus did not miss a beat. The shark smelled blood in the water. Done. They have the liquid capital ready to go. How fast do you want to move? 30 days, I said, staring blankly at the bathroom wall. Close the book in exactly 30 days. I will draft the purchase agreement right now. Check your email in 5 minutes. I walked out of the bathroom, my right hand pressing firmly against the thick gauze over my stitches. The apartment was completely dark, save for the streetlights bleeding through the cheap blinds. I walked over to the small kitchen table and booted up my laser printer. The machine whirred to life. The plastic gears ground loudly in the quiet room. The smell of hot toner filled the air as the printer spit out the heavy pages of the contract. I laid the papers out on the bare wood of the table. The words, "Real Estate Purchase Agreement," stared back at me in bold black ink. It was not stupid paperwork. It was a loaded weapon. I picked up a heavy metal pen. I did not hesitate. The scratch of the ballpoint pen against the paper sounded like a combat knife scraping over a whetstone. I pressed down hard, signing my legal name on the dotted line. The bomb was officially armed. The timer was set. They had exactly 30 days left in their perfect drama-free world. Saturday morning, 800 sharp. The wind coming off Lake Geneva was brutal. It cut right through the air, bringing a damp, biting chill that seeped deep into your joints. I stepped out of my truck and shut the heavy steel door. I was wearing my army dress blue uniform, long sleeves, heavy wool pants, the stiff collar buttoned all the way up to my throat, exactly like I was ordered to. Beneath the thick, scratchy fabric, the heavy gauze taped across my right side felt like a block of industrial sandpaper grinding directly against my fresh surgical staples. I walked around to the back patio. The sprawling lawn looked like a country club magazine spread. The grass was manicured, the water was calm. Elena was standing up on the premium oak deck, wrapped in a plush cashmere shawl, holding a ceramic mug. She did not look at my face. She did not ask how my drive was. She did not ask if I could breathe without the staples tearing open. She just pointed a manicured finger toward the shoreline. The heavy catering tables go down by the water. Elena commanded, her voice cutting through the wind. Get the linens on them tight. The caterers will be here in an hour. Hurry up. I looked past her. Hector was sitting in a padded patio chair. He was staring down into his black coffee. He heard my heavy boots hit the wooden deck, but he kept his eyes glued to the dark liquid in his cup. He refused to look at me. Complete, absolute cowardice. I turned around and walked down the slope to the grass. I grabbed the first heavy folding table, 8-foot solid resin and steel. I locked my jaw, grabbed the cold metal frame, and hoisted it up. A hot, sharp spike of white lightning fired directly through my abdomen. It felt like someone had driven a heated rebar straight through my ribs. I stopped breathing. Cold sweat instantly broke out across my forehead, slick and freezing in the lake wind. I locked my knees. My vision blurred at the edges. I did not drop the table. I hauled it down to the water step by agonizing step. I kept my posture perfectly straight. You do not show weakness to the enemy. After all the tables were up, I opened the caterers' boxes. The table linens were heavy and expensive. I pulled out a stack of folded cloth napkins to set on the chargers. I stopped. I ran my calloused thumb over the corner of the fabric. Stitched right into the heavy white cloth, done in raised gold thread, was a custom monogram. A drama-free day. I stared at it. They took the worst day of my life, the day I bled out in a dirty canvas tent while they drank champagne, and they turned it into a cute little party favor. A joke for their rich friends. They stamped my trauma onto a napkin for people to wipe their mouths with. My jaw muscles bunched tight. The heavy wool of my uniform suddenly felt suffocating. I did not rip the napkin. I just squared the edges, folding it with aggressive military precision, and placed it perfectly center on the plate. Lex, Chloe walked past me on the grass holding a mimosa and a crystal flute. She was wearing a white silk robe, her hair perfectly styled. She stopped squinting at me over her expensive sunglasses. "You look incredibly pale," she said, her nose wrinkling in disgust. "Like ghost pale. Make sure you put on a heavy blush before the guests get here this afternoon. I do not want people thinking you're sick in the background of the photos. It ruins the aesthetic." She did not wait for a reply. She just turned around and kept walking back toward the house. I reached for another napkin. Suddenly, a hand clamped down hard on my elbow. The grip was tight, bony but incredibly strong. It pulled me hard to the left, jerking me out of the direct line of sight from the deck, shoving me behind a massive row of blooming hydrangea bushes. I tensed, ready to strike, but stopped. It was Aunt Carmen, my father's older sister. A 70-year-old woman with iron gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a face carved out of solid rock. She was the only person in the entire Guzman bloodline who actually worked for a living. She owned a small hardware store in town. She did not care about aesthetics. Carmen looked at me. Her dark, piercing eyes cut straight through the heavy wool of my uniform. They cut straight through the stoic blank mask on my face. She looked right at the cold sweat dripping off my jawline and the rigid way I was holding my right arm against my ribs. She reached into the pocket of her faded wool cardigan. She pulled out a small plastic baggie. Inside were 2 thick, white, maximum-strength painkillers. She grabbed my hand and shoved the pills directly into my palm. Her hand was warm, calloused, and rough. Her voice was a low, gravelly rasp. "They didn't ask a damn thing about what happened to you over there, did they?" I looked at her. It was not a question. It was a flat, heavy confirmation of exactly what this family was. Carmen saw right through Hector's pathetic silence. She saw right through Elena's plastic vanity. She knew exactly why I was sweating in a heavy buttoned-up wool jacket in the middle of the morning. She saw the exploitation. She saw the blood. I did not say a word. I just popped both pills into my mouth. I swallowed them dry. The thick chalk scraped down my dry throat, leaving a heavy, bitter chemical taste on the back of my tongue. I gave Carmen a single, short nod. A silent acknowledgement between the only 2 realists standing on this property. I turned back toward the shoreline. The pain was still tearing through my stitches, but the cold anger in my chest was now absolute. The trap was set. I reached into the deep cargo pocket of my uniform pants. My fingers brushed the stiff edges of a thick, heavy brown manila envelope. The deed, the tax receipts, the absolute legal proof of who owned the ground they were standing on. I pulled it out and slid it into the inside breast pocket of my dress blue jacket, pressing it flat against my ribs, right over my heart. The round was chambered. Sunday afternoon. Cocktail hour. The Lake Geneva estate was packed. The driveway was choked with luxury SUVs, Mercedes sedans, and high-end sports cars. The caterers I'd hauled tables for were now walking around with silver trays, passing out smoked salmon hors d'oeuvres and top-shelf champagne to the country club crowd. I did not wear a sundress. I did not wear pastel colors. I stood backed into the far-shaded corner of the oak deck wearing my full army dress blue uniform. The heavy wool fabric was suffocating in the afternoon sun. The bright, sharp colors of my combat ribbons and medals were pinned perfectly flush against my chest. They caught the sunlight, flashing like steel warnings. I held a simple glass of ice water, no alcohol. Mixing vodka with military-grade painkillers and a fresh abdominal wound is a fast track back to the ER. My presence was a massive, uncomfortable weight in the air. Every time a wealthy guest in a linen suit walked past me, they dropped their eyes. They looked at the floorboards. They felt the heavy, intimidating aura of the uniform. It was the exact opposite of the careless, aesthetic vibe Elena wanted. When Elena finally spotted me standing by the railing, her face tightened. Her lips thinned into a hard, angry line. She glared at me, her eyes sweeping over the brass buttons and the combat ribbons with raw, unfiltered disgust. She looked at me like I was a bag of garbage that someone had dragged into her 5-star restaurant. She turned her back aggressively, grabbing a microphone from the DJ stand. A sharp, high-pitched feedback squeal cut through the low hum of jazz music and overlapping conversations. Clink, clink, clink. Elena tapped her manicured fingernail against her crystal champagne flute. The crowd quieted down. They turned toward the center of the deck, where a massive custom-printed banner stood. It read, "Chloe and Mason, a drama free forever." Chloe walked out. She was wearing an incredibly expensive silk slip dress, clutching the arm of her fiancé, Mason. Mason was a textbook freeloader, a guy with a perfect haircut, a fake Rolex, and zero actual income. He grinned, waving at the crowd like a politician. Elena gripped the microphone. She flashed a massive, blindingly fake smile to the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," Elena announced. Her voice was dripping with artificial sweetness, echoing over the heavy outdoor speakers. "Today is about love. It is about celebrating the peace and the pure joy that Chloe brings into our lives every single day." I watched her from the shadows. I took a slow sip of my ice water. Elena's eyes briefly flicked over to my corner. The fake smile slipped for a fraction of a second. She gripped the microphone tighter. "You know we live in a crazy world." Elena continued, her voice rising thick with forced emotion. "In a family, sometimes you have members who bring a dark cloud into the house. Some people just carry the gloom of guns, deployments, and constant exhausting drama." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few heads turned in my direction, their eyes darting over my uniform. Hector, standing right behind his wife, immediately dropped his gaze. He stared a hole into the toes of his expensive leather loafers. "Coward!" Elena did not care. She fed on the tension. She raised her glass higher. "But not our Chloe!" She beamed, placing a hand over her heart. "Chloe is our angel. She is the light. She is the one who brings true peace to this family. And because of that, Hector and I wanted to give her a wedding gift that reflects that exact same peace." She paused for dramatic effect. She looked at Chloe, then looked out at the wealthy crowd. "Today we are officially announcing that this estate, our beautiful Lake Geneva family home, will be signed over to Chloe and Mason as their wedding gift." The crowd gasped. "We want this property to be their forever home. A place where there is absolutely no darkness, no heavy baggage, and forever no drama." I stopped breathing. The cold water in my glass suddenly felt heavy. They were giving it away. Standing on the very deck that I bought with the blood money I earned, dodging mortar fire in the desert, they were publicly giving away my asset. They were stripping away my sacrifice, wrapping it up in a neat little bow, and handing it to a parasite who complained about the cost of table linens. A loud, thunderous round of applause erupted across the deck. Chloe squealed, throwing her arms around Mason's neck. Mason pumped his fist in the air. The crowd cheered, raising their glasses, toasting to the incredible generosity of the Guzman family. They were celebrating a robbery. A public, arrogant, bare-faced theft. I set my glass of ice water down on the railing. The heavy, stifling heat of the afternoon suddenly vanished. The air on that deck turned ice cold. The chaotic noise of the cheering crowd faded out, replaced by the steady thumping rhythm of my own heartbeat. I did not scream. I did not throw my glass. I reached inside the breast pocket of my dress blue jacket. My calloused fingers clamped down on the thick, stiff edges of the heavy brown manila envelope. The paper was warm from resting against my chest. If you have ever had a toxic family member try to take credit for your hard work or steal something you built with your own two hands, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment below with the word justice, so I know I am not alone in this. I pulled the envelope out. 0 hour. The safety was off. The crystal flutes moved toward the center of the crowd. The sharp clinking of glass rang out across the patio. People were smiling. They were ready to drink to the happy couple. I stepped away from the shaded wall. My heavy black leather combat boots hit the expensive oak deck. Thud, thud, thud. The sound was flat, hard. It cut straight through the low jazz music playing over the outdoor speakers. I walked with a stiff, deliberate cadence. The heavy wool of my dress blue uniform swallowed the sunlight. The combat ribbons pinned to my chest flashed like steel warnings. The crowd parted. Wealthy men in linen suits and women in silk dresses physically backed away, making a clear, wide path for me. The smiles vanished. The cheerful murmurs died in their throats. I stopped 10 feet away from the microphone. Elena's arm froze in the air. Her champagne glass was halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened, panic flashing behind her expensive makeup. She knew I was not supposed to move from that corner. I did not yell. I did not grab the mic from the stand. I just projected my voice from the chest. It was the exact same flat, commanding tone you use to lock down a chaotic squad under heavy fire. Before you all drink to the Guzman family giving away this estate, I have a few things to clear up. The silence was immediate. It was thick and suffocating. You could hear the water lapping against the boats docked down at the lake. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. I unbuttoned my breast pocket. I pulled out the heavy brown manila envelope. I did not hand it to Elena. I tossed it onto the glass coffee table sitting between the lounge chairs. It landed with a loud, heavy smack. I kept my eyes locked on my mother. 6 years ago, Hector racked up massive debt hiding from the IRS. He dodged taxes. He ruined his credit. The bank sent a county sheriff to this exact driveway to foreclose on this property. You were 2 days away from being put out on the street. I looked around at the guests. Their jaws were tight. Several people exchanged uncomfortable sideways glances. So I emptied my savings. I said, my voice echoing across the quiet deck. $50,000 in combat hazard pay. Money I earned walking point in hostile territory. Money I earned pulling landmines out of the dirt and patching up bleeding 19-year-old kids in the desert. I paid off the debt to save this family from total bankruptcy. Hector was looking at the floorboards. His face was the color of wet concrete. He looked sick, like he was going to throw up right there on his expensive leather loafers. I pointed down at the brown envelope on the glass table. That is the absolute legal property deed, along with 6 years of property tax receipts and premium insurance payments. I paid for the roof. I paid for the wood you are standing on. Every single piece of paper in that stack has one name on it. Alexis Guzman. Not Hector, not Elena, mine. Chloe took a physical step back. Her fiancé Mason slowly lowered his drink. He turned his head, staring at Chloe with a blank, confused look. He was a freeloader looking for a free ride, and he just realized the train had no engine. I turned my focus back to my mother. The anger in my chest was absolute zero. Cold. Dead. Last week I took mortar shrapnel to my ribs. I kept my voice perfectly level. I was bleeding out on a canvas cot. My unit commander called the emergency family line to say I was being loaded onto a medevac chopper. She told you I might not make it. I took one step closer to Elena. And this woman, this loving mother, told the army medic to stop ruining the party vibe. And she hung up the phone. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. A woman in the front row actually covered her mouth with her hand. Elena's face turned ash white. The thick layer of foundation on her skin looked like a cracked, dry mask. She opened her mouth to speak, to spin a lie, to play the victim, but her throat just clicked. No sound came out. Her social armor was completely shattered. I shifted my gaze to Chloe. She was physically shaking, gripping Mason's arm so hard her knuckles were white. Mason pulled his arm away. And while a military surgeon was cutting me open to pull jagged steel out of my stomach, I said, staring a hole straight through my sister, Chloe posted a picture of her champagne on this exact deck, celebrating a peaceful, drama-free day without me. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. The country club crowd was staring at the Guzman family like they were covered in toxic waste. The polished, elegant aesthetic was dead. They were completely exposed for exactly what they were, parasites. I squared my shoulders. I ignored the burning, tearing pain radiating from my surgical staples. I looked directly at the three of them. So, I made a decision. I let the words hang in the air for a second. You cannot gift a house you do not own. This estate is not yours to give away. Elena's hand began to shake. The champagne spilled over the rim of her crystal flute, dripping onto the wood. I sold it, I stated. The words hit them like a physical blow. Yesterday, I continued, my voice merciless and exact. It was a cash offer, no contingencies. The earnest money is already sitting in my escrow account. The new owners are moving in next month. I leaned in just an inch. I looked at Elena dead in the eyes, delivering the final fatal shot. You have exactly 30 days to pack your bags and get the hell off my property. The silence did not last. It shattered completely. Elena lost her mind. The polished high society mask melted right off her face, revealing the ugly, desperate parasite underneath. "You ungrateful bitch!" she shrieked. Her voice cracked, echoing harshly off the water of the lake. The thick layer of expensive foundation on her face creased as her expression twisted into pure, unfiltered rage. "You are a disgrace to this family. How dare you sell my house? My house." Even now, staring down the barrel of a loaded legal gun, she clung to the delusion. Behind her, Chloe's legs gave out. She dropped to the manicured grass. The white silk of her designer dress soaked up the dirt and moisture from the lawn. She started sobbing. It was not quiet, elegant crying. It was ugly, loud, open-mouthed wailing. She reached up, grabbing blindly for her fiancé. "Mason, do something. Say something to her." Chloe begged, her voice thick with panic. Mason did not step forward to defend her. He looked at the heavy brown envelope on the glass table, then looked down at Chloe crying in the dirt. He took a very deliberate step backward, pulling his arm out of her reach. His face curled in disgust. He was a guy looking for a free ride. He wanted the lakefront estate and the country club membership. He just realized he had hitched his wagon to a massive pile of debt and a family of frauds. Mason turned his back, shoved his hands in his pockets, and walked away from her. Hector finally moved. His hands shook violently as he reached out and picked up the thick stack of papers from the glass table. He flipped to the county records. His eyes scanned the bold black ink. He saw the official notary stamp. He saw the property tax receipts. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. He knew it was over. Crash! A heavy crystal wine glass slammed into the oak floorboards. It shattered into 100 jagged pieces, sending dark red wine splattering across Elena's expensive beige shoes. The red liquid seeped into the wood, looking exactly like fresh blood. Everyone flinched. I did not. Aunt Carmen stepped out of the crowd. Her face was set in stone. She marched straight up to Elena, her boots crunching over the broken glass. She did not yell. She spoke with a low, dangerous grit that carried across the entire patio. "You fed off her blood money for 6 years," Carmen snarled, pointing a weathered, calloused finger right at Elena's chest. "You spent her combat pay on your fancy dinners and your premium wine. And when the military called to tell you she was dying, you threw her back to the Grim Reaper so you could drink champagne on her deck." Elena stepped back, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. She looked around, desperate for someone to defend her. "You do not deserve the title of mother," Carmen stated, her voice echoing like a judge reading a guilty verdict. "You are a leech." The country club crowd watched the entire execution. These were people who survived on reputation, on status. They tolerated a lot of things behind closed doors, but they did not tolerate public humiliation. And they definitely did not tolerate being tricked into celebrating a scam. The whispers started. Sharp, biting murmurs. The eyes that had looked at Elena with envy just 10 minutes ago were now glaring at her with absolute contempt. An older man in a tailored navy suit walked up to the catering table. He quietly set his half-empty champagne flute down. He did not say goodbye to Hector. He did not look at Elena. He just turned his back and walked down the driveway toward his Mercedes. His wife followed. Then another couple. Then 3 more. The mass exodus began. The crisp crunch of tires on gravel filled the air as luxury cars fired up and rolled away. No hugs, no handshakes, no polite excuses. The elegant engagement party turned into a moral landfill in less than 5 minutes. They were treating the Guzman family like a highly contagious disease. Social ostracism in its purest, most brutal form. Hector dropped the papers back onto the table. He looked around at his rapidly emptying yard. He looked at his crying youngest daughter sitting in the dirt, his hyperventilating wife, and his fleeing friends. Then he looked at me. He took a slow step forward. He raised a shaking hand, reaching out as if he was going to touch the heavy wool sleeve of my dress blue jacket. "Alexis," Hector pleaded. His voice was a weak, pathetic croak. "Please, you are angry. I get it, but you cannot do this. We are your family." I took a half step back. I created physical distance. I kept my posture perfectly straight, ignoring the hot, tearing pain from the surgical staples in my side. My eyes cut into him like a razor blade. I already did it, I said. We can fix this. He begged, tears welling in his cowardly eyes. He was trying to use the exact same guilt trip he had used for 30 years. We can talk. You have to forgive us. I looked at the man who sent me an 8-word email while I was bleeding out in a chopper. Forgiveness is for my own peace of mind, Hector, I said flatly. I did not call him Dad. But forgiveness does not mean I give you permission to keep bleeding me dry. You are cut off. His hand fell to his side. I turned my back on them. I did not gloat. I did not smile. I just walked. My heavy combat boots thudded against the wood, then crunched against the gravel driveway. I walked past the catering tents, past the gold monogrammed napkins, and past the few remaining luxury cars trying to flee the property. I reached my heavy beat-up Ford truck. I grabbed the cold metal door handle and pulled it open. I climbed into the cab. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and shoved them into the ignition. I grabbed the heavy steel door and slammed it shut. Exactly 30 days later, the escrow account cleared. The massive wire transfer hit my bank account with a quiet digital notification. The legal transfer was absolute. The Hendersons took possession of the Lake Geneva estate. I drove my truck past the property one last time on my way out of the county. The heavy iron gates were propped wide open. Mr. Henderson was standing on a metal aluminum ladder on the front porch. He was bolting a heavy cast iron bracket deep into the wood. A large American flag snapped and flapped loudly in the cold wind coming off the water. He hung it right by the front door. A quiet, physical nod of respect to a veteran. Elena, Hector, and Chloe were gone, evicted by the new owners. The country club crowd completely iced them out. You do not survive in that zip code when your money is a lie and your reputation is garbage. They were forced to rent a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a cheap complex backed right up against the interstate. Every time a semi-truck downshifted on the highway, their thin windows rattled. Chloe did not get her elegant, aesthetic wedding. Mason packed his bags and bailed the exact same night I dropped the deed on the glass table. He was hunting for a trust fund, not a bankrupt family with a massive ego. Last I heard, Chloe was fighting with the boutique, trying to return her custom silk dress to get the deposit back. I am a soldier. I am not a thief. I pulled Hector's old financial records from a decade ago. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. I calculated the exact amount of the meager down payment he originally put on that house before he ruined his credit and hid from the IRS. I typed that exact dollar amount into the transfer box. I routed the funds directly into his checking account. I hit confirm. I did not owe him a single cent. I did not owe them a single ounce of gratitude. The ledger was clean. I bought my own freedom. I opened my phone settings. I tapped Hector's contact. Block. I tapped Chloe. Block. I tapped Elena. Block. The digital wall slammed shut. Any frantic calls, desperate apologies, or toxic screaming voicemails from Elena went straight into a black hole. Silence. Pure, heavy, beautiful silence. I set the phone face down on the counter and walked away. Late November, Thanksgiving Day. The air outside was freezing, biting hard at exposed skin. I parked my beat-up Ford truck in front of Aunt Carmen's small single-story house. The paint was peeling on the front porch rails and the gutters were old, but the foundation of that house was solid rock. I grabbed a 6-pack of dark beer from the passenger seat and walked inside. The intense heat from the oven hit my face the second I opened the door. The heavy, rich smell of roasted turkey, melted butter, and sage stuffing filled the small, cramped kitchen. A football game was playing on a cheap flat-screen TV in the living room. I sat down at the scratched wooden dining table. Sergeant First Class Sarah Jenkins sat across from me. She flew in from Fort Liberty just for the long weekend. She popped the metal cap off a bottle of beer and slid it across the table. The dark glass was cold and sweating against my palm. I took a long drink. I ran my thumb over my abdomen, tracing the line under my cotton shirt. The angry red stitches were gone. The skin was smooth. The brutal scar had healed into a thick, flat white line across my side. It did not pull or burn anymore. The gangrene was cut out. The body survived. Aunt Carmen walked over from the stove and set a heavy steaming ceramic plate down in front of me. She did not ask me to carry heavy catering tables. She did not tell me to hide my scars so her guests would not feel uncomfortable. She looked at me, looked at Sarah, and poured us both a glass of ice water. In this house, I was not an inconvenience. I was not a piece of ugly war drama ruining a fake aesthetic. I was a human being who took a piece of jagged shrapnel for my country, sitting with people who actually gave a damn whether I lived or died. I took a bite of the food. It tasted like absolute survival. You learn a hard lesson when you barely make it out of a combat zone alive. Endurance is not about letting people bleed you dry just because you share the same last name. Real strength is knowing exactly when to pick up the knife and cut the dead weight loose. Forgiveness is a tool you use to let yourself sleep at night. But access to your life, access to your time, your money, and your energy, that is a highly restricted privilege. You revoke it the second they threaten your survival. If you have ever had to look a toxic family member in the eye and cut them off to save your own life, I want you to hit that like button right now. Scroll down and leave a comment with the word "done." Let me know you made it out, and make sure you hit subscribe so we can keep building this community. I finished my beer. I set the empty glass down on the scratched wood with a hard, solid clack. I looked across the table at the people who actually had my back, leaned into my chair, and took a deep, quiet breath. The war was over.